And then he goes back to different reasons, but then he goes back just to what the Frierdiker Rebbe says openly in the Maimer, that there's a very big difference between them, and because there's a very big difference between them, we can't say that it's the level of Yecholos Lahoyer, and Yecholos Shaloi Lahoyer is really two sides of the same coin. It's not two separate things. Now, once we have determined that the level that the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about, the Maimer, or what we're talking about in the Tikkunei Zohar, that Oirin Sof is Lamaila Mail den Ketz, Lamata Mata den Tachlis, are two distinct levels. It's not on the level of Yecholos. The question that the Rebbe is going to pose now is, why is that important? Why cannot we speak about it the way it's in the level of Yecholos? Let us talk about that. Yecholos of the Eibishter has in it both sides of the coin. It can be above to no end. It can be milam to no end. It can be below to no end. Why does it have to specifically be talking about a level that is possible to divide and say, this is completely separate from that? What's wrong with talking about the level of Yecholos? Why is it important here for this Maimer to explain that there are two distinct levels? So that's what he's going to explain now in Ois Beis. Ois Beis, line 7, page 3. Yes, Lavayra Tam Shemad Gishwa Maimer Elul. Sheshnei and Yon Doire Sof Lamaila Maila Den Ketz Lamata Mata Den Tachlis. The reason why he emphasizes in the Maimer of the yard side of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the two ideas that the infinite light of Hashem goes up and up to no end, and below, down below to no end, are two distinct levels in the infinite light of Hashem, separate levels. Not the way this matter is in Hashem's capability, which then it's not two separate levels, it's just two sides of the same coin. The features are closer because this matters to the content of the general idea that's explained in the Maimer of the yard side. Being that there's a certain theme, a certain concept that the Frierdiker Rebbe is trying to communicate over here, that's why it's necessary to say that it's not the level of Yecholos. Why is the whole topic of the infinite light above is to no end? What was it brought down? What's part of the context that we're discussing in the Maimer? Because the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about, he's trying to explain the treasure, what's called Hashem's treasure, that like a king shares his treasures with his troops. This is what's given to the soldiers, to the troops, through the officers for being victorious in the war with the opponent. Since this infinite light of Hashem, this infinite level that goes up to no end, that is the treasure. That level of that goes up to no end, that's the treasure that's concealed and hidden, and like he says in the Mashal, that his parents never shared it, his grandparents never shared it, etc., etc. If we're talking about a treasure that's being shared for the sake of the war, you can't talk about the level of Yecholos. Why? Because in the level of Yecholos, there is no existence whatsoever, not even like a concealed treasure. By the way, this idea that it's not a Metzias was also one of the reasons that the Rebbe said in the previous Ois why we can't be talking about Yecholos, because when you talk about Oirein Saf Lamaila Maila Den Ketz, Oir is already a Metzias. Yecholos is not a Metzias even. But here saying another thing, the entire idea of Oitzer. The concept of Oitzer doesn't apply where there's no Metzias whatsoever. And that's even if it's a concealed Oitzer. How much more so, definitely it's not the treasure the way it's already revealed and given in actuality to the soldiers V'hainu she'ein kam metzias she'efshel litna. There's no existence, there's no item, there's no thing that you can give. It's not in the level of something that can be transmitted. Therefore, therefore, the Frierdiker Rebbe must be talking about and must say that it's talking about the level of oir, which the level of oir is a level of Metzias, as we explained in the previous ice. Another reason why Yecholos cannot be brought into this whole discussion, because the motivation. What's the motivation of the giving the treasure? To be victorious in the war. In the level of Yecholos, that motivation doesn't apply. This is what he's going to say now. Even more so, since the entire idea of giving the treasure to the soldiers is for the sake of being victorious in the war, how they move, and so it's understood. We're talking about such a level that it matters to the king, to quote the expression, the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, to reveal his will and desire and to bring about his victory. Another quote, to actually bring about the victory that should be according to his desire and his will. In other words, the idea of victory is connected with what the will of Hashem is, what the will of the king is. What is the cause of this desire to bring out his will for the victory? So again, he quotes the Frierdiker Rebbe. If there's an opponent that stands in the way and blocks it. Once there's an opponent, it's possible to say the idea of victory, defeating the opponent. When there's no opponent, the whole idea of victory doesn't apply whatsoever. He just runs his governance as he desires. But when he desires a particular thing and there's an opponent to it, so then he stands in a way of netzach, in a way of victory against him, and he brings about his victory. End quote of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimon. In such a manner does he need to, or does he feel the push to bring about his victory? Top of page Chavtes. He expends all of his treasures. And not only does he give away his monetary treasures, but even more so, he throws his life away for it. And he personally stands in the actual battle. Like it's explained, these quotes also from the Hemshech Mamar of the Legani. This means the being victorious is not just something that matters, that he should be able to have his kingship over the citizens. This matters to the very life of the king himself. So therefore, so too in the analogy that we're bringing the example for, when there's an opponent, like we have Pari said, and he says, I do not know Hashem. Or you have, like it says about a Molech, that he knows his master and he still intends to rebel against him. This doesn't just touch the revealed parts of Hashem. This matters to the very essence of above, just like it matters to the very life of the king. The king himself invests himself and stands in the battle. Move on, so the Rebbe says it's understood. All of this is not possible in the level of Yecholos. Why not? The capability, the possibility to shine, illuminate, reveal, and the possibility and capability not to shine, those two options are completely equal. There's no preference in the level of Yecholos. The preference comes only after he illuminated, so then light is positive, darkness is not. But when you're dealing with the level of the possibility to be light or dark, they're completely equal. So darkness and light, opposition and revelation are all the same. Valderach Maimer Razal, similar to what the Chazal say, Eini Yedea Be'ez Mem Chafis. There's a level of godliness that Chassidus explains about this Maimer Chazal. I do not know which of the following I desire. B'maseim shel tzadikim or b'maseim shel reshoim. I do not know if I desire the actions of tzaddikim or the actions of reshoim. Where can we say such a thing that Hashem does not know which of these two He desires? V'hainu shayicholis lahoyer al-yidei maseim shel tzaddikim v'yicholis shel loy lahoyer al-yidei maseim shel reshoim hi b'shaveh. The capability to illuminate and shine and reveal His light through the tzaddikim's actions, or the capability of not illuminating, which is the actions of Rishoim, are completely the same. That's why it says, Eni Yedea Be'ez Mem Chafetz. And the Rebbe says a very interesting diuk in the Lashon, especially if you look closely at the expression used in the Medrash, Eni Yedea Be'ez Mem Chafetz. I do not know which of these I desire, not roitze, want, but specifically chayfetz. According to what's explained in Amar Chassidus, the difference between will and desire, and desire is the innermost will, inyan hatainuk, the level of the light. So therefore, being that that's so deep, so it should have said in the Maimer Chazal, Ein Yedea Be'ezem Hem Roitze V'loi Ein Yedea Be'ezem Hem Chafetz. The Maimer Chazal should use the expression, I do not know which of these I want, the actions of tzaddikim versus the actions of reshoim, and not which I don't know which of them I desire. How is it possible even to say that there should be a desire and delight in the actions of reshoim? But the answer to that is, why does he use the word chayfetz? Because when you're dealing with such a high level, because the level of the yecholos, the capability of Hashem's essence, Hashem is not boxed into anything. Everything is equal. Both of them are equal. In this level of yecholos, in truth, we do not know, the Hashem Kaviyachol does not know which one He desires. In the capability to illuminate through the actions of tzaddikim, or the capability not to illuminate. Moving, it's understood. Now it's when we're dealing with that level of yecholos, it's not possible to say that it matters to the king. He needs to be victorious over the opponent. And for this, he gives the treasure. The whole concept doesn't apply over there in Yecholos. Shari calls it Shayach V'Achrei Sheyesh La'achlot Gmurim Sha'rotzen U'Boifen Kach V'Kach Dafke. All of this is applicable only after there is a complete decision that the will has to be in such and such a manner. Masha Enke, in top of page Lamed, B'Madrege Shaloi Huchlot Adayim Be'ez Mem Chafetz, in a level that was not yet decided which one of these he desires, meaning the level of Yecholos, V'Yecholos Lahoyer Shaloi Lahoyer B'Shavim Mamish, and the capability to illuminate or not illuminate are completely equal. So therefore, coming back to why the Frierdiker Rebbe cannot be talking about the level of Yecholos, V'Kiven Sheb'Maimer Ha'ilula Muva Inyan Del Maila Den Ketz Chulu, B'Negea Lebir Inyan Ha'oitzer Sh'Noisel Man She'achal V'Shon Netzach L'Amachama Imal and Menagid. Since in the Maimer of the Yartzeit, it's explained, or it's brought down the idea that is high to no end, concerning the explanation of the treasure that they give to the soldiers for the sake of being victorious in the war with the opponent. Therefore, he has to explain the idea that it's higher to no end, like if it should be not the way it's in the level of Hashem's capability, in the capability of Hashem's essence. In that level, we don't know. I don't know which one I desire. Therefore, the whole idea of victory and sharing the treasure for the sake of victory doesn't even apply. But rather, where is this whole idea plausible? In the level of the infinite light of Hashem, the level where Hashem already illuminated light. He illuminated light. That means illumination matters, revelation matters, meaning the maisim of tzaddikim, being victorious in the war matters. When you're dealing with the Ein Sof, the level of higher to no end, and below to no end are two distinct levels, like we spoke about before. And there is a very great distinction between them. Ois Gimel, line 14. Though what's spoken about over here is about the idea of the treasure, the way it's given to the soldiers for the sake of being victorious in war against the opponent. It's still a very lofty level. Because what's being spoken about over here is the level that's higher and higher to no end, the weights in the infinite light of Hashem, meaning the weight before the tzimtzum. So now, the Rebbe is going to elaborate how does this fit in with what the Frierdiker Rebbe says later in the Maimer, and connects it with a different level of makif. So he says, line 20, according to this, we need to understand. What he continues to explain the Maimer of the Yud Shvat, that these two ideas, that the infinite light of Hashem, the way it's higher and higher to no end, and that very infinite level that goes down below to no end, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains. These are two transcendent levels. Makif d'or Yosher, Makif d'or Chayzer, the Makif of the direct light, and the Makif, which is a higher Makif of a rebounding and returning light. Makif HaKarev and Makif HaRochek. There's a closer Makif and a more distant Makif. And the Frierdiker Rebbe continues to explain this by using a metaphor of a Rav that teaches and gives over an idea to a student. Lowest level, there's the part that this Talmud understands. The part of the idea that the Rav shares with the Talmud, that the Talmud understands, that's a pnimi. That's not even makif, that's internalized. Then, on a further level, there's the depth of the idea that the student is not capable to receive it and internalize it, and it remains in a way that's transcendent over his mind. It's like hovering there beyond his understanding. Mikol Malkim, and still in all, it's still considered that it's close to the receiver. And eventually, over time, he will arrive even at that depth that was makif over his seichel. Like the Chazal say, up until 40 years, a person doesn't really appreciate the mind and the explanation of his teacher. If so, comes out that top of Yud Aleph Darboim Shana, over the time of 40 years, he will come to the depth of the idea. That's called the close makif. In addition to this second level, beyond the Erpnimi, beyond the makif HaKodev, there's such a deep idea, even a bit of it, even an edge of it, would not become revealed and will never become revealed. It's not like a process that over 40 years will be able to reach it. Or inyan a makif harochik, it's the distant makif. So the Rebbe has a difficulty with this. If we're talking about the levels, 2 levels in the Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, the Ein Sof that's Lamai, Lamal, and Ketz, and Lamata, Mata, and Tachlis, how can we use these metaphors? So he says in line 5, the Lechura, they close in Hashbos HaSeichum Arav Talmud, the general idea of saying a metaphor of a idea being transmitted from a teacher to a student, that only applies when there is already the existence of a student. And then it has to take place after the teacher constricted his mind and his idea to the world of the student. Until he will come up with that part of the idea that it could be received and internalized on a level of an Ohr Pnimi. What would be the appropriate analog for this? What would the nimshal be for this mashal? The levels after the tzimtzum, not what we're talking about in our mind, the levels before the tzimtzum. You're talking about the rabbi reconstricted himself, and there's already a student. That's only applicable once there's seder ishtalshlus. Ad lam shochem b'isei achroina, the shem havaya, till it comes down even to the lowest level in seder ishtalshlus, which the entire seder ishtalshlus takes the format of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So then, when you have the final level of shem hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that Chassidus explains is called Shetach HaMakabel. That's like the area of the Makabel. That already has to do with the receiver. But that is only the after the Tzimtzum, not what we're trying to talk about over here before the Tzimtzum. Not only doesn't it apply these levels before the Tzimtzum when we're dealing about the Ohr Pnimi, or even the Makva Karev, but even the Makva Rochik, the Rebbe says, using this basis of a mashal doesn't apply before the Tzimtzum. He says in line 13, from this is understood, also what's spoken about the level of the distant makif is in the levels following the Tzimtzum. Even makif harochik, the distant makif. Despite the advantage and quality of the distant makif over the close makif, it's impossible to say that these 2 makifim are incomparable one to another. How come? The example used for these 2 makifim is like a garment, that's makva karev, versus a home, which is a makva rochik. Now, we know that a home and a garment are not that far from each other. True, they're different, but a person can find himself with his garment in the home. So there's a relationship, there is some type of connection. Since the close makif is in relation to the lower level in Seder Ishtalshlus, like we said, in the Hey Achroina, after the Ashpa comes down to the level of the Makabel, since Makif HaKorav has to do somewhat, it's close to that level of the Makabel. So the Makif HaKorav, which is not too far from the Makif HaKorav, has to at least be after the Tzimtzum as well. Because if it's going to be a level before the Tzimtzum, it's a distance that's incomparable. You cannot even compare it, you can't even put it together. Therefore, we must say, also the distant makif is the level after the Tzimtzum. So therefore, how does this all apply to what the Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about in the Maimer? Vim kein eich shaykh kol zel lebir in the mile the ketzel mata in tachlis. Gefishu by himself living at Tzimtzum. How is all this applicable to the explanation of the idea that he's higher and higher to no end and below to no end? The way it's in the Eirensal before the Tzimtzum, it cannot be even referring to, based on this mashal, to the infinite light before the Tzimtzum.